It's another day in America. Another day in America. Welcome to the America at 250 podcast, devoted to enabling us to see and feel America through the eyes and hearts of others, and as a result, take concrete steps to make America truly great. I'm Kevin Caldwell. And in order to pursue the purpose of this podcast, throughout the project, I'll be inviting a very diverse set of guests to share how they would answer what would make America great. It only seems fitting during this year in which America turns 250. Unanswered questions, 250 years and counting, we're still waiting in America. Now, before I start talking to my guest for this interview, Gabriella Gutiérrez y Muhs, I want to go back to something that my previous guest, Joey Williams, was talking about. He referenced John Brown a couple of times in our conversations as an example of someone who got to the point where resistance to oppression resulted in violence, in a violent attempt to overthrow a regime and create an uprising among enslaved peoples. It didn't work. But that's not my point, because we also ended up fighting an extended bloody civil war over a lot of different issues, but that included eventually a war that became about enslavement and ending enslavement. It started with that as a kind of fringe issue, although very much in the conversation among Northerners, and very much a fear in the South that this war would be an attempt to overthrow that way of life. And of course, we need to understand that way of life includes a life built on enslavement. And the North was just as dependent on enslaved peoples and their work as was the South economically. So with all that aside, what I want to come back to is this question of whether one of the things that would make America great would actually be more intentionally violent attempts to respond to things that people feel are unjust. And I just want to say that for myself, I espouse a nonviolent and compassionate response and approach to these things, and to things that are unjust. And for me, that includes compassion towards our oppressors. And I want to say that with great care, because I am a white person who enjoys a lot of safety and privilege that other people don't. So I'm aware of that, and I'm aware that it is easier for me to talk about nonviolent and compassionate responses. But I also am someone who says that he's a follower of Jesus. Jesus, my guru, if you were, my teacher, the person I follow. And he was an oppressed person, an indigenous person from a region called Palestine, who taught that loving our enemies was the way to live in obedience to the divine purposes, to forgive one another, to turn the other cheek. Now, he did engage in a form of what could be called violent protest when he went into the temple and drove out the money changers. But what I've come to notice about that and kind of appreciate in a fresh way is that anger and that physical expression of anger which he directed was not directed towards the oppressors. It was actually directed towards his own people who were operating in cooperation with and benefiting from the Roman oppressors and the Roman protection of the temple and the whole temple system at that time. It was also directed, that anger that I'm speaking of, directed towards his own people who were taking advantage of poor people who came to offer the sacrifices. It was directed at his own people. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic that gets lost when sometimes Jesus is used as a model of a revolutionary. And if he is a model of a revolutionary, and I think he is, then we need to pay attention to how he actually went about it. And that's actually just what I'm trying to do myself, I guess, imperfectly. So again, I recognize that for me, given my social reality as an older white male in America, these are probably easier things for me to say and get my mind around than it might be for others. And so I mean no disrespect or criticism. I'm simply trying to express the way that I try to follow this early indigenous Palestinian revolutionary named Jesus. All right, now on to our conversations with Gabriella. And as you will hear, this is going to turn to conversations eventually about the role of Christianity in the forming of America and whether there's a role for that in making America great in the future. But we're going to cover a lot of other things as well. So buckle in and stay tuned. Thanks for being here. Well, welcome everyone to the America at 250 podcast and another episode. Today, in this interview, my guest is Gabriella Gutiérrez y Muhs, and I'm going to be having her introduce herself a little bit. But one of the things I came across that is written about her is that, and by the way, Gabriella, do you prefer her or what pronouns do you prefer? I didn't ask you.
Oh, any pronouns are good to me.
Okay. So something about this any pronoun person is that they are a poet and literary critic who focuses on inscribing Chicanx, Latinx writers, poets into American literary narratives, focusing on highlighting the historical invisibilization, that's a tough one, of
Mhm.
Chicanx poets and writers in mainstream culture. We're going to come back to some of those things as part of our conversation, either in this interview or the next one. But I just thought that was an interesting way to begin, give our listeners a little bit of maybe some curiosity about who is this person. Um, but also, just in full transparency, Gabrielle is an old friend, old in every sense of that word. We're both getting older, but also our friendship goes back a long time to when my wife was Gabriella's roommate in college, way back in the late 70s.
I was thinking, Kevin, that I've known you the longest of any man I've known
Wow.
that I socialize with. Yeah,
And you know, obviously we've had gaps where we didn't have a lot of communication, et cetera, but Susan and yourself have stayed very connected, and we both love you a lot and really appreciate you. But just so my listeners understand, I didn't invite Gabriella onto this as a friend per se, but because of the respect I have for her scholarship and her poetry. She's a very gifted artist and poet, and
thank you,
works in
Kevin.
English and Spanish, and really does explore kind of intersections of culture and identity and what it means. Ultimately, these are my words. What does it mean to be a human being in this shared space we call the earth? And so I'm looking forward to exploring things with you. And
Great.
but anything else you would want to tell our listeners about yourself? You're like, where are you right now? And tell us about your family and that sort of thing. Just physically, where are you? And yeah,
I'm in Seattle.
okay.
Our quarter just ended. I'm a professor at Seattle University, where I've taught for 26 years,
Mm,
and where I came after getting my PhD at Stanford.
mhm,
Um, And I'm in a beautiful house that I feel very privileged to live in every day
mm,
with a beautiful garden
mm.
full of light. And I was editing a collection of poetry this morning
Okay.
on longing and desire.
Wow.
And I was a teacher, which is very important for me because I was a teacher for several years. I think I've taught every level.
Okay.
Um, yeah, well, not kinder, which
Okay.
is the
But
hardest. Kinder
yeah,
is the
yeah.
hardest to
But
teach.
elementary up through now at a university.
Community
Mm,
college,
okay.
university,
Yeah.
part-time,
And what
course.
subjects have you primarily taught, especially at the higher levels here? What's your areas of
Well, I should have
focus?
brought my list of,
Oh,
I
that's okay.
probably taught 28 different classes,
Okay.
right? Some of my classes have been cross-listed, even with anthropology,
Okay.
but a lot of times they're cross-listed with English.
Hmm.
And I teach uh, about gender, sexuality,
Yeah.
Chicano, American ethnic literature, literary criticism, and
Yeah.
of course, A, E, I, O, U, Spanish. And
Yes.
I taught
Yeah.
French for many years. I
Right.
taught, and I'm in women, gender, and sexuality studies and modern languages.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
thank
like
you.
that because otherwise I would get bored.
Yeah.
So I like
The
the readings
diversity
I
of
have.
subjects.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it really represents actually the interconnection of,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you, in
Mm-hmm.
addition to the friendship, I know you primarily through, in terms of your work in poetry. That's where I've most
Mm-hmm.
engaged with your thinking. And I
Mm-hmm.
just think that artists have a way of expressing interconnection of different themes and topics that artists tend to think horizontally and sideways and
Yeah.
inclusively as opposed to just top-down thinking. And so I really, really
Well, intertextuality is one of the
exactly.
topics that
That's
I've explored with,
yeah,
it's how they say that we all have just, but it's not true.
yeah,
We all have just one topic to say and in
yeah,
different ways, but it's not true.
right.
I
Well,
I think that what is most important is that all my classes, whether it be Spanish 1 or literary theory, I teach them um, intersectionally,
yeah,
looking at race, class, gender, sexuality, religion,
right.
abilities, disabilities, all that.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And I'll be putting, just for my listeners' benefit, I'll be putting more information about Gabriella, where you can find some of her books and other more information about her in the podcast description. So please check that out and check out the things that she has out there for you. So I want to. This is an America at 250 podcast, and
Yes,
one of my driving sets of questions has been, what would it take to make us great? Not again, because I keep asking
we've
people
never been great.
exactly. Well, what I tend to do with people who, are wearing the hat or they're telling me make America great again,
Yeah,
I tend to start from, okay, that'd be great. What period of time are you trying to reproduce?
absolutely.
Let's look at that. And so far nobody's given me an answer. So, but part of what I'm trying to do is draw people into at least an empathetic and compassionate way of engaging with people that might be different than themselves. And so I'm bringing a variety of guests onto
Great.
my
Hmm.
podcast, um, which for me means, to me, empathy and compassion is only complete if it leads to some kind of action. And so probably in our second interview, we'll actually start talking about, all right, based on these things we're talking about, what's it going to take to be great? But where I would really like to start is at a more emotional level, experiential level right now. It wasn't that long ago that in America we had a Super Bowl, and the halftime performer was an artist named Bad Bunny, and that brought out all this kind of controversy over he's going to sing in Spanish and he's going to do this and it's all going to be this and this and this. And of course, America right now is embroiled in all sorts of conflicts over immigration and what does it mean to be resident and legal and borders and all those things. And we're about to head into this big birthday celebration, anniversary celebration in July for America at 250. And there's a lot of rhetoric and celebration, and people are going to be having all sorts of small scale and community wide celebrations. I've been asking all my guests so far, what does it feel like to see and hear all that rhetoric? Um, in your case, someone named Gabriella Gutierrez y Muhs, yes,
Oh,
but
yes, they have a lot
yes,
of problems with that.
there is that, but what's it like? Kind of fairly briefly, but just what's it like to hear all that, see all that?
Sometimes frustrating,
Hmm.
Kevin, because
Sure.
you feel, where do I start educating people?
Hmm.
And as I get older, um, I don't want to be that old lady that doesn't cope and that doesn't understand the
Well, I think
evolution
you're
of
doing
things.
okay. You seem to not be an old lady who isn't coping. So, yeah.
No, but you know what I mean.
Mm,
It's like there's different ways of dismissal. When I was young, because I've always looked a lot younger than I am,
mm.
um, it was like, oh, you're too young to know that. You haven't
So kind of
experienced.
an ageist.
Yes.
Mhm.
So there's different ways of dismissing people.
Sure.
And of course, that's one of the things that we need to erase
Yeah.
or improve. I always tell my students that they can never respect someone too much. People are
Mm,
not going to
mm.
complain because
You
they
you over
respected me too
respected me.
much, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um,
Because it all comes from respect.
yeah,
And as a counselor, I've also been a counselor. Um, most problems in relationships, whether it be parents and children or couples or
yeah,
friends, come from disrespect,
yeah. Mhm.
which is that we don't really understand what that person is bringing to the plate.
I was going to say it's a disrespect and
Mm,
devaluing are
mhm,
very similar related concepts,
mm.
right? And attitudes.
And instead of with other cultures that they understand
Mhm.
that because of your age, in Spanish we say, más sabe el diablo por diablo que por viejo.
Mm,
Like, por viejo que por diablo, excuse me, it's backwards.
okay.
The devil knows more because he's old than
Uh-huh.
because he's the devil.
Mm. Yeah, it's more his age. Yeah.
So, so this respect for age,
Yes.
that
Yes.
somewhere along the line, yes, things have shifted and evolved, but, you know,
Yeah.
respect my experience. I've
Yeah.
been here, I've been looking at this evolve,
Yeah.
and we don't get that. We don't get that.
I mean, I think most other cultures, people would never dare to say something like, "Okay, boomer," right? Like you
Yes,
know,
yes,
yeah.
uh-huh,
They might think it, but they would never say that. And
yeah,
I'm not just saying that because I'm a boomer, but at least my identity card would tell you I'm a boomer by birth, but I feel like my age in my soul is different. So
yeah.
anyway, yeah. So am I hearing you right that some of what you're feeling, some of the frustration is this kind of disrespect, devaluation of people, even as
And
we're
of
celebrating
language,
America, right?
of language,
And language too. Yeah.
because I
Hmm.
speak
Hmm.
several languages,
Hmm.
and when I'm speaking French, when in the past, when I've had French people visiting us,
Yeah.
um, people are very interested. You're at a bakery. Oh, I've been there. I've been to Paris,
Mhm.
But the moment you say that you're from Mexico,
Mm,
the conversation ends.
interesting. Mm. Not
Yeah.
interesting. Not interesting in a good way, but
Yes.
yeah, of
So we notice. You think we
yeah, of
don't notice, but we do notice
course. Yeah.
how Spanish is ranked lower. Now, about Bad Bunny, we've been singing in other languages forever.
Ever. Yeah,
Forever.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and most other countries, I mean, Susan and I were very, um, it's been very impactful in our own lives to have lived in Pakistan, which had, almost 90 languages. Most of those secondary languages are taught in the schools, along with the national language of Urdu and, of course, a lot of English, etc. But it's not dismissed. People's languages are not dismissed in the way that, you hear so much here about well, if you're going to live here, you need to, et cetera, et cetera.
I've
And
been told that. I
of
had a
course.
Mexican friend, the aunt of one of my students staying with us, and we were at the store. She didn't
Mm,
speak English.
mm,
Oh, we were speaking Spanish, but also I've been told that because my children are bilingual, and I made it that way. Like
yeah.
when I was dating my husband, I told him,
Yeah.
you learn Spanish or this is over.
Hmm.
Because I didn't want my children
Right.
to be embarrassed about who they were.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'd seen other people,
Hmm.
right, that their mothers, even though they were bilingual teachers, hadn't taught their children
Yeah.
Spanish.
I mean, there
Right?
is, I think, and I'm going to use this word very
Yes.
in its technical sense, okay? So I don't want my
Yeah.
listeners to be offended by what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
I'm using it in its technical sense.
Yeah.
There is an ignorance, I think, in monolingual white culture
Yeah.
that kind of equates, it doesn't kind of equates maybe a lesser fluency or an in English or a difference of accent. The fact that someone has who primary language might be Spanish or any
Mhm.
number of languages that somehow gets equated with lesser intelligence, um, lesser
Yes.
respect,
Yeah.
to use your word,
Instead of more, right?
instead of
Instead of
more.
more,
Like,
which
oh,
is
in your
yeah,
country,
which
you
is the
actually
case.
speak
Do you
five
speak
languages,
Urdu?
right?
Yes. In
Yeah.
in Switzerland,
I mean, all my Pakistani friends spoke 4 or 5 languages,
Yes.
yeah, and they didn't go to school, most of them. So it's just, it's not an
They
intelligence
learned
quotient. Hmm.
out of curiosity and
Necessity,
wanting to say, I'm
curiosity.
part of this world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there's all these people that speak
Yeah.
these languages. And yes, and I do have some students that are eager to learn Spanish,
Hmm.
but in general, it's so amazing to me that a lot of the students in San Diego that I run into that come from San Diego,
Mm.
they took French.
Interesting. Yeah. Hmm.
And they're right there next to the
Right.
border, right?
Right. Yeah. So exploring what's the, and I'm sure every person's story could be different about why they chose French, et cetera. But my guess is there's probably some unexamined motivations in there as well, probably for some.
Yeah, I really think
Yeah.
that this structural racism
Hmm.
that people, I've
Which
known
fits in, baked into
hundreds
the
of
attitude.
them,
Yeah.
yes,
Hmm. Yeah.
yes. And but then when I ask them, I say, did your parents tell you not to marry a Mexican when you
Hmm.
were coming, or an African American when
Right.
you, or a Filipino
Right.
when you were coming to school? None of them say to me, no, they didn't.
And right, and even in families where that might not have been spoken from
Mm,
the mouth,
yes.
it was just known, right?
Mhm.
And now I want
So
to,
that's a sin of omission.
yeah, but it comes from that attitude, and I think when I hear people sometimes get offended when we talk about systemic racism,
Mhm.
but really what the personalized side of that is it gets embedded into our attitudes and we don't even know it. Um, because it's just the air, it's the water that we drink. I want to pivot from. I'm really glad you used the word respect or disrespect as part of the experience,
Mhm.
and I want to pivot to a story you told me when we were talking about doing these interviews. It was a story of your uncle,
Mhm.
and I think it fits really well here because it actually speaks to this deep thing of respect among many other themes that it touches. And I know you know the story I'm talking about.
Yes,
When he got
it
it had to do with the ice cream and then the backstory
yes,
of why he was so
yes,
insistent to get the ice cream for this person.
yeah.
So I'll let you
So,
tell the story.
okay. So
Yeah.
a lot of times we just don't um realize how big the bucket is, right?
Mm, mm,
So I'm a little girl. I'm at the Santa Cruz boardwalk. It's probably 10 or 8, 8 or 10.
okay.
And then I watched my uncle Francisco run, and he was running. I was after him, right? Because
Yeah.
he was headed for
Where's
the
he
ice
going?
cream store.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, maybe he's gonna buy me one. And
Mm,
I think he might have. I don't remember that part.
yeah.
But what I do remember was that he was so attentive, and I remember hearing him speak English which I didn't know he spoke because
So
at
this
my
was the first
house,
time you heard him speak in English.
yes,
Wow.
yes.
Okay.
And I didn't speak English.
Okay.
I had
So
not,
you didn't really know what
gone
was
to
going
school.
on
So,
at first.
but I was like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, and how attentive he was in speaking to this Black woman
Mm,
who
mm,
had two children. She was holding one and had another one,
mm.
tugging at her skirt. And I'm just watching, and he's like, she was buying one cone for the three of them.
One ice cream cone for the three.
Yes,
Yeah. Mhm.
yes. And you might do that. Now we
Sure.
would do that for health reasons, but
Yeah. But yeah, probably
but back
not at that
then
point.
it
Yeah.
was not for health
Yeah.
reasons. Everybody loved ice cream.
Hmm.
And then also he said, "Do you want another one?" to her, and
Mm,
he bought her a second one, and oh, yeah, do you need help with anything? Are you sitting?
mhm.
Just this attention. First of all, I'd never seen my uncle be like that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That level of attentiveness.
Yes,
Okay.
and kindness and generosity. Um, and I always had in my mind, what was that about?
Mm,
So the last time I saw him, he had come to Fresno to see his daughter and granddaughter who live there. And they asked me to drive my mom, which was from Watsonville to Fresno. My
okay.
mom wanted to see him,
And just for listeners, that's a pretty good distance. That's a number
Yeah,
of hours
five or
driving.
5 hours, yeah.
Mm, yeah.
But my mom wanted to see him, of course, her older brother, the
Sure.
oldest, the eldest.
Okay.
So I went over there. Mm, My cousin was married to a man that owned a little piece of land with orange groves, and they had Mexican families living there. And we also caught a snake that
Okay.
disappeared. They ate it right
Okay.
away.
All right. Well,
But the conversation I finally got to have, well, the women were my mom, and they were making food. And I sat with him and
mm,
I asked him, I told him about that memory.
yeah. What happened on
And
that pier in Santa
yes,
Cruz? Okay.
why?
Hmm.
Why did you? And everybody, all the Black people that he saw, he was, hello. He wasn't like
Mm,
that. There were lots of Mexicans, but he wasn't
okay.
like that.
So
He
there's
was,
something there, right? Yeah.
yes. And he told me how Black women have had saved him.
Mm,
And of course later I found a book which is it's right here, I think. Me Voy pa Pennsylvania, which is by Barbara Driscoll.
okay.
And it's actually I found this book way after I had this talk with my
Mm,
uncle,
mm, mm.
which is that during the Bracero movement from
Yeah.
42 to 64, I believe.
We'll probably come back to the Bracero movement a bit later.
Mhm.
So just, yeah.
They would,
Oh,
I always tell my students that, when we're talking about immigration and all these issues and how upset white workers feel because these people are coming and
gonna take
taking
our
their
jobs.
jobs.
Mhm, mhm,
And I tell them, well, all my uncles were abducted.
mm.
And I say that because actually there was outreach. They would send announcements on the radio, meet, especially in the north of Mexico, because my family's from Durango, Mexico, Chihuahua, all the capitals, big
And this
cities,
and was
Ciudad
this in the
Juarez.
40s? Was this in the 1940s?
It
Was that
was in the 1940s,
right?
yes, the early 1940s.
Yeah, like
When
World
the
War
but
II.
it was ongoing. It was
Yeah,
ongoing. They
sure.
kept recruiting because I think they kept losing people.
Yeah.
And so they would basically ask you questions. They would check on your teeth immediately
Mm.
to make sure that you had good teeth, good health hygiene. And then later they would when you were accepted, and they would bathe you and put DDT. You would take a shower and
Okay.
put DDT on you.
Mm,
but they also checked your testicles. They checked your private parts, right?
mm.
To make sure you didn't have a VD.
Yeah, and just for our listeners, this is all part of if I'm tracking right with you, Gabriela, this is all about, it's during World War II.
Yes,
Most of them,
absolutely.
many of America's young men are fighting either in Asia or in Europe, and there was a need for workers, um,
Young and old,
young and old.
and they needed a lot, especially where they sent him, which he had never done before, was to lay track and fix track
Right, and I think
in
now we're getting to
Pennsylvania.
the
And
part
the
of where
whole,
he got saved
yeah,
by
the
the
whole state of
yeah.
Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
right,
Okay.
is
Yeah.
where they were doing this.
Okay.
And we also need to remember the Rosie the Riveteers, which were
Yeah.
all these women that
Right.
left home, and it was young women, and it was women of all ages that could
Mm,
leave and support the war. And go Rosie the Riveteer
mm.
uh, was using, tools that she had never used before.
Right.
It was not in the kitchen. It was
Yeah.
building and sealing uh,
Hmm.
train cars, etc.
Yeah.
They also worked in submarines, but he was not. He was working,
He was on the railroad and
yes,
right.
yes,
And this
which
I
he
think
had
is
never done before.
right. And
My other uncles were sent to California,
okay.
which is how we got to Watsonville.
Okay. Some of your
And
family's journey.
that, yes,
Yeah.
and that made a lot of sense because they were sending a lot of the fruit came from the West to the
Sure.
East to send abroad.
Again, in
Um,
support of the war effort and yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
canning,
Yeah.
with the Industrial Revolution, a lot of those factories were
Yeah.
uh, in
And
the East Coast.
and you told me that your uncle was actually the one in Pennsylvania actually
Yes,
got put in charge of a work crew that
yes.
was made up of some interesting mixes here of people. So
Yes.
tell us a little
So
bit.
they were women, all women.
Okay.
And he got there and he was telling me the story about how he just wanted to cry. He didn't know where he was
Yeah.
because they would take them and get them there. So he didn't know how to leave.
It just
He didn't know
was up
how
in
far he was
Pennsylvania.
from the border.
Right.
We didn't have the electronic tools,
Yeah.
which
It's not like he could call his family every night on
is,
his cell phone.
yes. But they put him in charge of these Black women mostly,
Okay. Who
and
laying
who
track
had been
and
working
right
there,
there.
who
They're
had
laying
been laying
railroad track.
track,
Yeah.
right? And
So they've been doing this already. They're
yes,
experienced.
yes, they're
Uh-huh.
experienced. And I asked him, Tio, why did they do that? You didn't speak English. No, I didn't speak English,
And he
right?
didn't have experience laying
He
railroad
didn't have
tracks, right? Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
He didn't know anything about that. And he just wanted to leave, run, and.
Sure.
And he said he would cry himself to sleep,
Mm.
because he couldn't communicate with anybody,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so the punchline is that when I asked him, why were you put in charge, Tio? He said, oh, mija, just because of this thing I have between my legs.
Because he was a man. So you're in
And
charge.
that's a history of,
Yeah.
gender, race,
Hmm.
class,
Hmm.
for all of us.
Yeah.
It's like they had to have a man wherever the man was from.
Yeah.
So that gives you a little bit of information about the validity of women, the worth
Mm.
of women. Yeah.
Which for those, if my listeners who've been listening, from the beginning, they know that one of the fault lines of it, that I think is still in our uh, Declaration of Independence is the attitude towards and the assumptions about women that are
Yeah.
baked into the Declaration, even though it's not said, and the way that our early founders viewed women as not able to own property and not vote and all those kinds of things. In fact, at least in certain parts of America, women couldn't have their own credit card until the 1970s. So I mean, these are deeply, deeply
1974.
yeah,
Yes.
74. Yeah, if I
Otherwise,
was a woman, I would know that off. I would probably know the exact date, but yeah,
no,
yeah,
because that was a time when I was, I think I got at the end of the 70s my first.
yeah,
But before that, my father would have had to sign for me
right.
to have a bank account with Wells Fargo.
Yeah,
So,
and not just because of your age. That would have been true even
no,
as you
it
got older.
was
So,
because you were a woman.
so back to your uncle. I apologize. I got us a little off track
No,
there,
that
but
that's really it. That's
yeah,
but
and so
but
he
what's
developed.
interesting to
Oh,
me is that this man who'd
yeah,
probably gone to sixth grade
yeah,
um, could analyze the
yes, and
system and the values,
yeah,
and it hasn't
mm,
been
yeah,
that long. I
yeah.
mean, I talked to him probably in the 90s. He was born in 1918, I believe.
Okay. Well,
And I talked to him at the end of the 90s. But what I'm saying to you is that it hasn't been that long.
right. No, that's very, very recent history when you think about it.
Yes,
And
yes, that
but
women were seen in that manner.
yeah, and you said that one of the things he told you when you got the chance to ask him about this was that they saved him. Um,
Yes.
and
No,
so
he
to
went
say
on
more,
about that
yeah,
because
say
I
say a
kept
bit about
asking
that, and then
him,
we'll transition to something else. But say a bit
okay,
about that. Yeah, how did they save him? These women.
well, that's what I asked him. And he said, they took care of me, mija. They
Mm,
showed me, they taught me
mm,
how to do this,
mm,
and they let me be their leader when I didn't know anything.
mm, mm,
And they took care of me, and they taught me things. They taught him English, basically.
mm, mm,
And so they were. Um, they were the reason he was able to do that job, and also to feel compassion from people of another race and another gender who were totally different than him.
yeah,
But because those women had been abused also and ignored and made to feel little, they were able to identify what he was feeling.
right.
So that's very important.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. I really wanted to get that out there.
Mhm.
Wish I could
Yeah.
have met him. Sounds like a really interesting man. I want to, so we've mentioned Braceros, which was part of this
Mhm.
program we're talking
Yeah.
about. And it's kind of an example. We've had multiple examples in our history since becoming a nation, but kind of an example of ways that when it's to the benefit of particularly white majority and white businesses, white farm owners, et cetera, when it's to our benefit, we want porous borders, and when we think it's not to our benefit, then we start closing them down. But this whole question, even of borders existing, of course, is also, when you think of human history, a pretty recent development. So I want to go back a little bit, well, not a
Mhm.
little bit, a lot. We're coming up on 2026, 250 years since 1776, but I mean hundreds of years before that, before Spain, before there was a Mexico in the way that we understand it, before there was an American federal government, um, people lived in what we now call Mexico, the
Mhm.
South, the great Southwest of the
Mhm.
United States. But somehow we got here where there are now borders crossing where the ancestors of the people who still live there used to live before there were borders. And to me, that's an extremely significant thing to bring out because I think most white Americans look at this kind of top down. They're looking at a map as
Mhm.
if they're 30,000 feet up and they're seeing these borders as if these are like the Ten Commandments that came down with Moses from
Yes.
Mount Sinai, right? This is the way it is. Rather than looking from the ground up
Mhm.
as a descendant of people who have always lived in this area before there were
Absolutely.
borders. And
And it
I think
hasn't been that long,
it
Kevin.
hasn't, when
It
we think of
hasn't.
human history and when we think of the history of, how far back the ancestors of those who lived here long before any of the colonial powers showed up. and started their own versions of arguing over borders. It just,
My
yeah, I just feel like I want to explore
Mhm.
that. Like, how do we get here, you know? And I'm
Yeah.
not expecting you to tell us the definitive answer, but I want to explore it with you.
Well, I will tell you the definitive.
Okay, I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Um, when I was little, and my aunt lived in Fabens, Texas,
Okay,
and there was a little station, and basically, we could have like lay down and be in both parts of Mexico. And
okay.
they,
All right, you were that close to, yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
they're in Fabens.
Yeah,
There was a little station, and there was basically a piece of a wide piece of wood
okay.
was a bridge.
Yeah,
And you could lay down and you could be, or you could, we used to jump like, oh
okay.
no, I'm in Mexico, now I'm in the United
Yeah.
States.
And depending on whether you want your feet
Yes.
in Mexico and your head
And
in
there was a
Mexico or vice
rivulet
versa.
under us. It wasn't a big part of the river of the
Yeah,
Rio Bravo.
yeah.
That's one example.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wish and I hope I have to research this because I don't know if it's true, but when I was little and we lived in Juarez, um, my mother used to, the indigenous women, there was a piece, a lot that was almost like a cave, right?
Mm,
And the indigenous women, the Tarahumara, used to come and give birth there. It was the place they gave birth. It was in front of our house.
mm,
We could tell when someone was going to give birth because these women, you scream usually somewhat. Or anyway, my mom, she was always a generous, incredible woman. And she would take the women in after they gave birth, and she would give them, clothes and clothes for the baby. They
mm.
had their own clothes because they wore it's not linen, it's they're muslin. Was it be
Yeah,
muslin?
okay. Yep, yep.
Skirts and shirts. And they usually had a couple of children in tow, right?
Yeah.
And giving birth. So the children had been there with the mom. And then in this little cave that was in front of our house. And they could cross. What I remember, so we got to know them, we got to talk. They could walk across the bridges and nobody stopped them
Mm-hmm.
because they were indigenous.
Yeah,
And what I have to research is I don't think that happens anymore
right. I think, look,
because
I'm
they
sure
have
you're
to, they
correct.
should,
Yeah,
yes, they
yeah,
should have the right.
yeah.
And that was understood. That
Right,
was understood. This is, I'm talking about the 60s and 70s,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah. And I
So
think,
we don't have that anymore. In some ways, we've become more unkind,
yeah,
right? And we've also negated that these people are from here and have been living here and using the land and raising their children on both sides of the border.
long before any of my descendants would have ever shown up
Exactly,
anywhere
exactly.
near.
It's
Yeah,
it's
and
it's their land, it's our land.
yeah,
Most Mexicans are mestizo.
right. Mixed.
So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
those two, I have those. I also was telling you about the porosity of the border because more than now, people I think under 40 still experience this, that you could live in Mexico and work in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You could study in Mexico and live in the United States. People studied medicine over there
Right.
because they couldn't get into medical schools
Here.
here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there was this porosity. We went to get, people got leather goods from Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
leather shoes.
Yeah.
Poor people that couldn't afford a pair of nice leather shoes in the United States.
Yeah.
And of course, produce came from Mexico. My aunts used to take trips just to buy thread
Mm-hmm.
because thread, which is very ironic, the brand of thread that they adored is this German thread that is now sold in Mexico
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
But so it
Well,
was very practical, but
yeah.
it was porous,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden, um, and people understood that it was about the economy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, now the only thing we understand now, if you go across, you're going to see all these people buying meds
Mm.
and going to the dentist.
Yes. And
Yes, down there.
people
So
with
that's
my color of skin and all of that going down and
yes,
wanting to take advantage, right,
yes, hmm,
of an economy where
yes.
those things are available less expensively or perhaps more freely because they're not available here, that sort of thing.
Well, all
Depends
the
on the medicine.
weightlifters,
Yeah.
it's like
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. There's
but
all that.
also other meds that you
Yes.
cannot get
Right.
here, sleeping
And
pills,
And I think
etc.
that's there is a level of hypocrisy in the
Absolutely.
whole
Yeah.
border conversation happening right now,
Mhm.
and we've touched on themes of that hypocrisy. I mean, the hypocrisy as people who came as immigrants and took
Oh,
over things to say now you can't come into our border. Saying that to the descendants of people who were here before us.
but
Um,
it's even sadder when the descendants of people who were here before become um, capitalist, corporate greed, capitalist pigs, right? That they are
Yeah. Well, and that,
this
yeah,
intracultural violence
yeah,
where,
yeah,
I'm more American than you because I got here 2 years
before you,
before, or
or
because I speak English,
yeah,
which
I,
which
I,
is a privilege.
I explored this a little bit with my prior podcast
Hmm.
guest, Joey Williams, who is a descendant of indigenous peoples, is part of the
Hmm.
leadership among California tribes. And he has observed sort of some of the intertribal
Yeah.
conflicts that
Mhm.
stem from kind of an idea of wanting to have certain privileges, which must, sometimes we come at that from this attitude that, well, for me to have them, there's only a limited number of goods. If I'm going to get mine, you can't have yours. And
Yeah.
so tribes who have federal recognition or state recognition tend, in some cases,
Hmm.
wanting to exclude tribes that are not
Yeah.
yet recognized, et cetera. And so and what we explored was this kind of internalization of
Yeah.
oppression.
Internalized oppression,
Yes,
yes.
exactly.
But
And
also, that
but
is,
but that gets
I think it's
politicized, right?
important. Yes, it does. But
So
I think
white
it's
people who
so, well,
will,
look at a lot
yeah,
of the border people, the rangers and all that. A lot of them are Chicanos. They're Mexican American,
yes, and
you
that's the
know?
that gets politicized by whites to say,
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
and it kind of becomes these are the good Mexicans, right?
Well, that's another conversation.
Yes,
The good
yes,
Mexican and the bad
yes,
Mexican.
exactly. And
You
that
know, and
happened
the
with
bad
African
Mexican is the one
American.
that doesn't
Yeah,
agree with them
yeah,
fully.
yeah.
If you are a good Mexican, you look down and you say yes.
And
But I,
yeah, that's what Joey was bringing up with the tribes is that
yeah,
the tribes that got recognition early tended to be the ones that were docile and quit fighting sooner.
yeah.
And so,
But
yeah,
I think, Kevin, that the intracultural issue is very important, and we broach that in Presumed Incompetent, a book for academics. Well, not
say the
necessarily
title again.
Presumed Incompetent.
Presumed incompetent. Okay,
There's 2 volumes of it
okay,
by popular demand.
okay.
Um, and in 2012 is when that book came out, and it hopefully has really changed the way
Mm,
that we see people of color in the academy.
yeah.
Because before that, it had not really been established that we are treated differently,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
But I broach some of that intracultural, that sometimes um, people think that just because she's Mexican American, she's going to be just and she's going to support, or because she's a woman, she's going to support other women.
This or that. Mhm.
And that is not true.
Yeah.
And we need to keep an eye. We need to police that a little bit, right? Other people, because it's not fair that we put the wolf
Mm-hmm.
in charge of the sheep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that person is going to be the most oppressive because they
because they've
don't want,
internalized all
yes,
the
and they
anger.
all they want to look good,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
to mainstream, to their boss, but they also don't want that person who might be superior to them
Mm-hmm.
to show them, what is hard work.
Yeah, and
So the
it's
people
that.
that go up in ranks are not necessarily the best workers in any area, whether you're a CEO or whether you're an
Yeah.
administrator at a university.
Mm-hmm.
No, you are not. You're the people, a lot of times, that are willing to help mainstream America and the white people hide
Yeah,
their issues,
right.
right?
Well, I want to transition. I need to start moving us towards concluding
Yes,
this
but I
interview.
did
But
want to say one last
yeah,
thing.
please, please, please.
So there's Jorge Bustamante
Okay.
in the name of the university, which is, I don't want to say it's the equivalent of, because no, Harvard doesn't dictate, but it's very high ranking, the top ranking research university in Mexico, El Colegio de Mexico.
Mm.
And this professor, Jorge Bustamante, works there. And he has documented something that you said, and I wanted to give that name.
Okay.
There's another colegio in Tijuana. So his students and he have documented how the U.S. and especially the Border Patrol treat people depending on U.S. economy.
Mm.
So
Okay.
when we need workers,
We're
these
suddenly.
people have been recorded
Mm.
giving mints or candies or you
Mm.
know
Mm.
little canes for Christmas to the people, the incoming undocumented people.
Okay.
And they've also been recorded beating them,
Right. So
like in
depending
difficult
on.
times.
Hmm.
Right now, we don't want more people. You
Right.
know, Trump, I didn't want to say his name, but yes.
Yeah.
So he's the ruler, and so they're gonna look good to him.
Right.
So Jorge Bustamante, he might be
Documented this.
retired by now.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
has documented a lot of this and how
Powerful. Yeah.
everything that's happening, um, if things are going very well,
Mm.
then we need them. We need them to grow. We need them. Mexicans build most of, they're in construction. In the West Coast, it's mostly Mexicans.
Hmm.
Roofing.
Well, and I remember seeing a on Instagram, which is, not, I did, this wasn't a news item. I don't get my news from Instagram, but it was a white construction worker
Yeah.
who when I first heard him, I thought he was going to be kind of ranting against
Hmm.
people from
Immigrants.
south of the border, right?
Mhm.
But what he was talking about was, I keep hearing people saying, that they're taking our jobs. And he's like, I look around on the work site and all my coworkers are immigrants and no white people want this job. Like if
Yeah,
you're going to be angry,
absolutely.
come work here then. Come
Absolutely.
work here. And he said nobody wants to do it. So we
Also,
got
when
these.
you're
Yeah.
researching, I was researching femicide, feminicidio,
Mm-hmm.
and I did a teach-in at my university, various speakers on this about 15 years ago, when we were highlighting the border killings of,
Mm.
we don't know how many, but between 600 and 800 women, young indigenous workers who were killed and tortured at the border.
Mm.
And I was researching that, and what I came up with were 10,000 young men
Mm.
that had disappeared or died
Wow.
working in construction in the
Wow.
last 10 years.
In the last
So,
10 years.
you
Okay.
know, those
Yeah.
those are not,
Yeah.
statistics that we keep or share.
But
Those are
still,
hidden statistics.
yeah. But
And
yeah.
so we need to know where and going even further back,
Mm.
Alejandro Morales from LA has a novel, which I wrote quite a bit about. It's called The Brick People,
Mm.
talking about how during the Mexican Revolution, before and after. When a third of Mexico left,
Mm.
they were trying to escape the hacienda system, which was like a plantation where they had to buy everything from the owner, and the owner owned them basically, different type of servitude. And how they came into Simon's Brickyard in LA, in Montebello.
Okay.
And it was another it was another hacienda system. And they were making all these bricks that were being
Wow.
shipped to the Midwest, to the East. So construction and making these goods, it's nothing new. Mexicans have been building this nation
Yeah.
for a long time now.
Well, and as you highlighted earlier, contributed to the war effort in their own way, and yet when we don't need you now, thank you very much, go away, but
Yes.
without the thank you.
Ye-
So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to start wrapping this part up, but I want to kind of give listeners a little bit of um, preview of where I would like to go next
mhm.
time.
Okay.
We didn't get to cover in this one the way I thought we might uh, some other aspects of the early history, the pre-Spain, pre-Mexico, but Christianity and colonization, and now, as we see it, Christian nationalism really force us to look at questions of if America is going to be great, how do we navigate this, you know, dominant Christian
Mhm.
aspect of our heritage in its unhealthy and healthy ways? And in our pre-conversations, you've got some insights I want to draw out. So we'll go there next time and look at kind of
Right.
historically and contemporary and look at that and how that might actually help us be great if we could navigate some of those tensions. I
In
want
other
to,
words, we just got our fingers wet.
yeah. Well, so we'll come back to that. Stay tuned, listeners, to what that might mean. I do want to, there's that line in the description about you that I read at the beginning, the historical invisibilization
Mhm.
of, in this case, Chicanx poets, but it's much broader than that. I want to kind of explore that, some of the dimensions of that and how addressing that could help us be great. And then you've also had some really interesting insights about the piece of our Declaration of Independence about the right to the pursuit of happiness. And I want to talk a bit about some of the aspects of that statement that people might not think about. You had some really, really important insights that might, again, address how to become great. And there's a number of other things as well, I know from previous conversations. You have some thoughts about macro level. And
Yeah.
we'll talk as well about, so as individual people, it's easy to think, I'm just a little person. What can I do? And
You can do so much. You can do
so
so much.
exactly. Mhm.
I think that everything we do, we're mirrors. We're mirrors.
Mhm.
And so what we do gets reflected upon other people
Yeah. Yeah.
that can see how you treat people.
Mhm.
Don't get in line in front of a person who doesn't speak
Mm.
English,
Mm.
right? And I
Little
think
things.
we already mentioned that the respect and the respect, um, make sure that you're respecting people. Um, you can't stand in front of a taco stand and say, oh, these tacos are horrible, they're greasy, and, in front of a bunch of people that don't speak English
Mm.
and be eating their tacos. You can't do that, you know?
Yeah.
So
Just basic
yes,
things.
basic
Yeah.
respect that you would do. How would you treat your grandmother? Well, that's not a good saying because in this country we don't really respect the
I was,
elder.
yeah, I was
But
gonna
how
say,
would you treat the person you most love?
yeah,
And
that's
I
a great
think
way to
it's
put it.
so
Mhm.
important. For me, I tell my students, you're my gems,
Mm.
right?
Mm. Yeah.
And I will treat you, I will put cotton balls under you to
Mm.
not hurt you.
Mm.
And I think it's so important that we treat every person on the bus, at the store.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Mhm.
Everybody can do that
Great.
because that shows others,
Right.
how they should treat people. It sets a precedent for them. We're
I
not really educating our youth. We're not
right.
having conversations with them
Or modeling
They're
what they're.
connected or modeling.
Mhm.
Um, I talk to people that just graduated from high school or are in high school. They can't even face you and have a conversation with you because all they do is watch shows. They
Mhm.
don't have any practice. So I'm not sure that I answered that question,
No,
but
we're gonna
going back,
we'll come back to some of these things. Yeah, we want to come back, and
yes.
I think
Oh,
you're touching. I think you're
yeah.
touching very much on ways to personalize it,
Mm.
but I also know that we want to talk about bigger systemic issues as well, and we'll do that when we come back for our next episode. So thank you so much, Gabriella, for this one.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Kevin.
all right,
It's a
and
pleasure to talk to you.
you as well, and to all my listeners too. Just please do check out things in the descriptions. I'll be putting more information in there, and hope to see you or hear have you hear us at least in the next episode. Thank you again, Gabriella.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone. Maybe someday in America, another day in America, maybe someday